Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, our region's longest-running public affairs program. Lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota are joining us today for a recap of the week's activities at the state capitol. This is your opportunity to call or email your legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, Tony Sertich. A little over 3 weeks are left for legislators to get their work done. With many of the biggest issues left to be resolved, it might be a busy few weeks at the Capitol. Tonight, you can join in the conversation. Email or call in with questions for the lawmakers that represent you. To ask a question, dial the phone number on your screen, or you can also email your questions to ask@pbsnorth.org. Joining us in studio today is Senator Jason Rarick, a Republican from Pine City, represented District 11. And also with us tonight is Representative Natalie Zeleznikar, also a Republican from Fredenberg Township, representing District 3B. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So probably the biggest issue that hit the legislature this last week had nothing to do with what happened inside the Capitol. A state senator was arrested for first-degree burglary. Now, none of us are lawyers, and that is happening outside the walls, but it's impacting what's happened inside the building. Things kind of ground to a standstill this week. So I don't want to talk about the details of this arrest, but I know that some legislators are calling on her to resign. Others, there's an ethics committee that's going to meet to look at this. There is no law actually pertaining to what can happen to a legislator when they get arrested.
Right.
And there's actually 6 legislators in the legislature serving right now who have been arrested in various ways, from DWIs to trespassing, drunken disorderly conduct. And so, Senator Rarick, an uncomfortable conversation, but I'll start with you. What do you think should be done in this instance? And then more broadly, how does that impact the other 6 or 5 legislators who were also arrested for something?
Yeah, I think some of the details on this one are maybe a little bit more disturbing as the 911 transcripts came out than what some of the others, but yet, a DWI is also pretty serious. So discussions to be had. I know I support the getting to the ethics hearing sooner rather than later. There's a lot of debate as to whether she should be allowed to vote right now or not. I think that'll be the discussion of these next couple of days. Without her, it's a 33-33 tie, which puts things in a kind of a precarious situation in the Senate. But I think we need to get some more of the details from the police report and get some of that information. But it's one of those touchy areas. Your first reaction is, I think, to call for her resignation. Then you step back and you think, okay, she gets due process. She should be able to have that, but I think we should try to get to it as soon as we can so the public trust is there when she's casting a deciding vote.
She has a court hearing coming up in early June, which is, of course, after the legislative session. And once a ethics complaint gets filed to the ethics committee, they have 30 days to meet and start their resolution in that process. Representative Zeleznikar, I know this is in the other legislative chamber, but it definitely impacts the session. And as I said before, there are legislators from both political sides of the aisle and both the House and the Senate that are serving, that have not just been charged, as the senator has, but have been charged and convicted. So how do you see, once again, not maybe directly to this situation, but how do you draw a line by saying this is grounds for some punishment, and maybe in other instances we haven't seen much?
I think in my entire career, anybody that's a licensed professional, we've had scope and severity in licensing for professionals, and I think there's a code of just ethics called to this chamber in the House and in the Senate. And when I listen to the 911 transcript and listen to what's been just public knowledge and record, this is a burglary. So this is a different scope than the other offenses that you've mentioned, to my knowledge. I don't believe they were felonies or potential felonies. And so this is a really serious situation. And I think that's why it has a very heightened question to the public of what's going to happen. And so I think we're all waiting to see. I hope there will be an ethics process that happens for the public's best interest sooner than later.
All right. Anything else on this topic, Senator Rarick?
From what I understand, I believe May 7th is when the first proceedings are going to happen on for the Ethics Committee.
All right, thank you. So please call in and write in with your questions, and we already have one, and this goes to Senator Rarick. The a principal from Cloquet Elementary School writes in to talk about the Northern Lights Academy, which is looking for funding to either build or renovate their building to provide equitable space for their current students and expand their capacity to provide special education services. And so it was just checking in with you, Senator Rarick. They're saying you're supportive of the bill. They're asking what is the status and the likelihood it be included in our capital investment or bonding bill.
Yeah, so I've been very vocal about this bonding bill should be focused on infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, and asset preservation. And I do put this into the category of asset preservation. I've been at both of the sites, the one in Cloquet and the one in Carlton. We have 11 school districts that have kids with special needs that go to one of these two sites, but the rooms that they're in are just what's kind of left over and available in the two schools. That does not meet their needs at all. And when you hear the stories of the families, I was just at Carlton tonight on my way here to meet with 3 families with kids in the program, and what it does for these kids, it gets them. Many of these kids, they can't be in the regular classroom, and they end up being homeschooled and away from contact with other kids. And so this really helps the parents. It gets these kids with teachers who are specifically trained to help them. And what they really need is a space that's designed specifically for their needs. And that's what this bill would do. It's coupled with one also for northwestern Minnesota, a facility over in their area as well. We hear more and more, especially coming out of COVID, how difficult, whether it's autism issues or just some behavioral issues that students have, and just being able to get kind of out of that classroom setting into a one-on-one situation or a very limited situation with limited other students can be very beneficial for these students to calm down and actually get back to learning. And I think that needs to be our focus for kids. Education is what's important. And so I absolutely support this project. I think it would be fabulous, and when it almost double their capacity. I believe they said they're at 48 students right now, and this would allow them to get up to 90 students. Would be very beneficial for the 11 school districts from this immediate area that participate.
And so it is a proposal that's going to be considered for the capital investment or bonding bill. Now, both of you have been on the show, but for viewers who maybe missed those shows, this is the major piece of legislation that generally happens this session. When last year was a budget year, this is the main piece, and it's when the state borrows some money at low interest rates to invest in these sorts of infrastructure type projects. And so before I get to you, Representative Zeleznikar, the other half of that question was, what do you think the likelihood that this specific proposal is included in that final package?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. We're at that stage right now where those negotiations and kind of conversations are really starting to pick up. I've told the people, and I'll continue to tell my caucus, this is my #1 priority for my district, which I hope will help get it across the finish line this year. I just believe it is very worthy. And so as these negotiations happen, the stories that they shared with me today really help, I think, convince other legislators that this is a project worth including.
And generally, this bill is one of the last bills to get passed, and there's a lot of negotiation going on because it takes a supermajority to pass this bill for the state to borrow money instead of just spend tax dollars. And so it will take bipartisan votes to get this done. We talked about this last time. Representative Zeleznikar, can you give an update in the House on where we're at in this process? And I know you talked about some Proctor projects last time. Or is there anything else on your wish list that you're hoping to see included in a capital investment bill?
Thank you, and I appreciate Senator Rarick's leadership on the special ed project that needs to happen for these 11 districts. I've spent time with our superintendents in Proctor and Hermantown, and we have students that desperately need this, and I was able to see it with Representative Dotseth, and so I fully support that project. It has an instrumental role. And as far as the other projects, I agree with Senator Rarick. You know, right now it's going to be the process that you well know, that it will be with where they're going to be reviewing everything. But as far as the projects we have in this area, we have some great projects. Rice Lake has I just was at the fire hall yesterday for the pancake breakfast, and they want to have an expansion there for training for EMTs, which is, I'm on the EMS, the ambulance service for the Emergency Medical Service Task Force, and that's a big issue. And so where we train people in an efficient way for all the townships, we operate on a volunteer system, and that's a big concern. And then having a place for emergency evacuation for the area, for federal code and for other needs that we could have in this area, that would be a great project. And so that's an important thing. Hermantown has gap funding from the one from last year to get that to the finish line. It was on a bonding list for a few years, and so there were so many delays. The construction costs with just supply issues have been hurting many projects. And then we're trying to get Proctor utility expansion across the finish line too. So we have some great projects for the Northland and hope to get some of them finished.
And both of you were cautiously optimistic last time you joined us that we would see a bonding bill passed by the end of session, because the other piece of information is this doesn't have to be done. There's no law requiring it to be done, and you could actually go home this year and not do anything and the world wouldn't stop. But you were both cautiously optimistic. Are you still in that position?
Yeah, I would still say I think it can get done. I know the governor supports getting one done. I think most people want to see one get done. It depends on what's going to be included in it.
Okay.
Still optimistic as well, Representative Zeleznikar?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Next issue, we got a few questions coming in the door already. One viewer wants to know, is it true that a sheriff has the power to activate the National Guard to shut down trails? Anybody familiar with that?
I am not aware if that is true or not.
Okay. Any idea on that one, Representative Zeleznikar?
There's a first for everything, and this is a first for me. I have not had anybody ask me this question, so.
All right. And neither of you serve on the committee where this would probably come through. We'll try to get an answer maybe next week as well to the viewer at home. Next up, viewer asks, where is the Human Rights Act in regards to compelling faith-based organizations to operate outside of what their faith recognizes? That is the gist of the question. Are either of you familiar with the Human Rights Act?
Very much so. That is one of the hot button issues facing us this year. It is very important. As of right now, many of the religious organizations are really worried this was kind of taken away from them in a few areas with what happened last year. And they want to make sure that they're able to have that right to practice their religious beliefs when it comes to hiring. There are a lot of negotiations behind the scenes. I believe we can get a fix done on this one this year. It sounds like there is a willingness to. But again, this is another one. It's probably going to take right till the bitter end to get it done, but I think it's the right thing to do, and I fully support it.
Representative Zeleznikar?
That's a great question. In fact, I've been meeting with congregations of all faiths. It's a #1 topic for the faith community. And to Senator Rarick's point, we absolutely have to make sure religion is part of that doctrine. And as of right now, that piece has been removed, and it is going to be problematic for religious schools and for hiring practices for people to follow their faith across the board for every denomination. And so we want to make sure we're continuing to support the faith communities, and we will. We will work hard to the last day to get this done.
Next up, a question on Social Security taxes. And this question comes from a viewer from the Iron Range. Since property taxes in Chisholm-Hibbing area have gone up 100% in the last 3 years and no relief in sight, what is the status of not taxing Social Security? And I know last year a lot of work was done, and a vast majority, I want to say 80-some% now of Minnesotans are not taxed for their Social Security. But has there been any proposals and any progress on furthering that this year? We'll start with you, Representative Zeleznikar.
I'm 100% for eliminating the Social Security tax for everybody. And so the the way it was written last year was that it was set at income levels. So basically, about $105,000 right now is not taxed for a married couple, and it's around, I believe, $85,000 for a single that's not taxed. And so those are considered the upper rung of anybody above that is wealthy. And so I think there's a lot of people that are arguing that's not the benchmark. They've already paid their taxes, and so I'm of the opinion that they should be fully eliminated, like several other states across the country have done.
And this has an impact to the state budget, of course, to the tune of millions of dollars if you adjust this. And so any proposals this year? This is a non-budget year. Are we going to be seeing any action on this?
There have been proposals made, but when you look at the target that was given to the tax committee, it can't be done this year with and meeting that target. So it'll be a discussion that has to happen next year when it's a budget year again. I think it was unfortunate with the surplus we had last year that it wasn't done last year, but next year it'll be back. There's no question.
Okay. Though, just to be clear, last year something was passed.
Yes, it wasn't the full, but
Correct.
a big portion, but not the full repeal.
Okay. So what you said, Representative Zeleznikar, if individuals are making $85,000 or less, or couples $105,000 or less, they do not pay taxes
Correct.
on their Social Security.
Correct.
All right. Next question from a viewer. Is the legislature doing anything in regards to anti-Semitism facing both Jewish people and those who support Israel? Is there any legislation addressing these issues? Senator Rarick, we're going to start with you.
So, yes, there's been a lot of discussion around this as well, and I know we have some different resolutions. There's no legislation as such to be put in place, but a resolution is a statement that you make in support. But one of the things, talking with JCRC, the group that represents the Jewish community, they're also a little bit nervous about some of that as well. They don't want a lot of attention drawn because of some of the fear that they have in some of their communities and things that have been happening. So we're listening to them very closely. I think they know that many of us support them, and we try to do everything we can. I know a number of us have gotten the combination, the U.S. and Israel flag lapel pins that we wear to show our support. A number of us have the Israeli flags that we display at our offices now to show our support. Behind the scenes, we are always making sure that the Jewish members know that we support them. So we're trying to do things in the right way so that we're not actually stirring the pot and maybe making things worse than they need to be.
We saw this in the Northland, where actually the city of Duluth had a ceasefire resolution come up, and it was voted down with the majority of the council stating that this wasn't a city issue, this was more of a national or federal issue. Representative Zeleznikar, I'll just ask for your reaction to what Senator Rarick said, and then maybe bigger picture. Is this something that should be addressed by the state legislature?
I think Senator Rarick made perfect commentary on it, where we are as legislators. I mean, we stand with Israel, and we're standing with, our Jewish legislative body too, to let them know that we support this. And, unfortunately, we're seeing events go on around the country and in our state and across the world, and they're unfortunate. So, hopefully we'll find, whether it's a resolution, that's the best path to go. But I think the people that we serve with know that we stand with them too.
Well, please keep those questions coming in by phone or by email. A couple other issues I want to tackle right out the front here is permitting. We've talked about this with all of the guests sitting at this desk in northeastern Minnesota, and there's a permitting streamlining bill that it's making its way through the legislature. It passed the Senate and is being debated in the House as well. Senator Rarick, you voted against the streamlining of permitting. Can you tell us why you did so?
Yeah, this is I've served on a number of legislative panels over this last year because of the role I've played in the Energy Committee. And I was pretty clear all the way through that I wanted to see a permitting reform bill that was much more expansive. This focused primarily on two sectors. That was for the transmission lines for solar and wind generation. There was an amendment that was put on that would give some help for the mining operations. But as we talked about, and I was working with the chief author trying to say this can be a bipartisan bill if we include more reform, get more agencies involved and work this through. And I will say I got a little bit emotional, a little bit heated on the floor as this came up. Our president even pulled me aside and later said, I've never seen you quite that animated and worked up. But what we saw, instead of trying to have the bill become more bipartisan and maybe incorporate some of that, an amendment was adopted to kind of alleviate the fears of some of the far left environmental groups, which to me took it the exact opposite, the wrong direction of where we should be going with this. I want permitting reform, but I want it for all sectors in Minnesota. We're seeing so many expansions of businesses move to North Dakota or South Dakota. They all need that, whether it's in the construction industry, whether it's mining, whether it's the pipelines. They all deserve this same permitting reform to know that when they start a process, what the process is, approximately how long it's going to take, and to have the agencies kind of working in coordination and not just picking, a couple of sectors that get it because the political headwinds are in their favor right now.
So business sector, chambers of commerce and others supportive of this legislation, and so it received support from many in the business sector and labor unions and otherwise. Some would say, isn't half a loaf better than no loaf at all at this point, and what would you say to that?
Again, I do appreciate that some permitting reform is going to happen. What I fear is that because, and this is part of what got me worked up on the floor, it was claimed that it was the fear of this not getting it good enough to stop it from happening. My belief is it's the far left environmental groups that have stopped this from happening in the past, and they've picked a couple of little sectors that have their favor, and once these pass, no one else is going to get it. And that's my issue with the bill, and why I want more encompassed with the bill to make sure it happens for everyone. Or at least I had even told the chief author that if it incorporated something in the bill that showed us there was a process that was going to begin, if we were going to put together some type of group, study groups to look at these other sectors, that could get my support, and none of that was incorporated in the bill.
What's the view in the House on this bill, Representative Zeleznikar?
I think there's more to be discussed as we go to the end of the session, but from my perspective, building a strong commercial tax base is essential for northern Minnesota, and that permitting process is part of it. And so this process is literally for one section, and there will always be a section that needs to have permitting, and this one is wind and solar in the transmitter lines, but we have housing issues, we have building businesses, we have companies looking if they're going to come to Minnesota or not, and when we have North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Iowa having different permitting process, we can't afford to be a flyover state anymore. And so I think it's a very valid question. The Chamber's done tremendous great work and said, look, we need permitting reform, and this isn't something we've heard new. So I think to the people that have for good reason questions, they're asking, why are we all of a sudden able to expedite the permitting process for one section for solar and wind when we've been fighting for decades to get permitting reform? Why now is it able to fast track? We have companies that have been waiting for 20 years to get something done in Minnesota. So I think it's a valid question, and I'm hopeful we're going to find a compromise where we can get it done in solar and wind, and also all the other really critical manufacturing jobs and industry and across the board, so that we can have a thriving commercial tax base for northern Minnesota.
Representative Zeleznikar, you brought up housing, and so that'll take us to that topic as well, and regulation. And there was a bill, once again, that received broad support from different sectors that normally aren't at the table. Once again, labor and business and other folks around affordable housing, to look at some reform there, which would really say that local communities, they would disallow any sort of zoning requirements at the local community level to make sure that folks could build different types of housing in local communities. And so where did you stand on that, and what is your sense about allowing for different zoning changes and having the state come in and say, we're going to make sure that you can build multi-unit housing all across the state in different communities, regardless of the local potential restrictions?
When that bill first came out, I signed on to that bill. You know, I'm excited, like everybody, to try to help have housing move forward. We have a significant housing shortage in the state. And with high interest rates of 8%, it's not helping for us to be able to have housing expand farther. But in the sense of this, what it came down to when I found out the details of the bill, the reason I withdrew my name from it is I had serious concerns over local control. And when I talked to the cities, and I talked to, you know, the local, for zoning, not having that local control at a zoning level, to me was really problematic. And so I think we have to come at it from an angle where the communities are doing strategic planning with a comprehensive plan with the cities and the schools and the counties, and to not have local control when you're dealing with housing, you have to have the infrastructure. And so without it, we could really have a debacle, and I didn't want to see that happen. The cities know what's happening, and to not have local control, I felt was the wrong move to go. So I'm looking forward to seeing revisions.
Senator Rarick, your position on this, and anything else that might be happening around housing issues this year?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm supportive. As I look at some of the ordinances that have been put out there, the ones that I struggle with are the ones that are the aesthetic ordinances, where you have to have a brick front, or you have, when we're doing things to try to protect people's property values who are already there and already established, and it prevents people in lower incomes from being able to get into homes, those are the things I struggle with. I hear from some of the very people, it was one of the things that got me involved with, in politics to begin with at my township level. Folks who in the 70s had a trailer house on the lake and came up, from the metro area for the weekend, and over time they removed the trailer, they brought in a little cabin or something, and then later in life they bought the next door lot and they've built a very nice house, and then they're trying to put in ordinances to prevent people from following that very same path. And that's what I believe we need to get away from. Should a local area be able to do zoning and stuff to say, here's the area where we would want to do multifamily housing, and here's an area where it would be single family housing or duplexes, things like that. Absolutely, I support that. But when you get into the aesthetic parts and other provisions where they're trying to create certain wealth within certain communities and protect that, that's where I struggle. I think that diversity among neighborhoods can be very good, and when you're preventing people from getting into that starter market, it's very difficult. And I also serve on the board for Habitat for Humanity for my 5-county area. And it's, that's exactly what we build, is a simple one-level house that gets people in and starts building that generational wealth by having equity build. And that's being prevented in a lot of these cities right now with the ordinances that they put in place. So some revision around that, I believe, absolutely has to be done.
I want to talk about an issue where maybe on its face doesn't seem like it's related, but I think it is. And actually, Representative Zeleznikar, you brought this up at the very end of the last time you were here, Uber and Lyft. Oh. And so this may not impact all of the districts in northeastern Minnesota, but the city of Minneapolis passed locally in their city some pay requirements and other requirements for drivers of rideshare. And Uber and Lyft have said they're going to leave the community, and in some instances maybe the state, if these go into effect. And there's been some delays by the city council in implementing that. And now the state legislature is potentially getting involved in overriding what the city of Minneapolis did. And so directly to Representative Zeleznikar, do you believe in local control for the city of Minneapolis to allow them to pass ordinances, just as you were talking about your desire to see local control on housing ordinances?
I think this Uber Lyft thing is such a complicated piece, but to the piece of public safety and public health, there are so many people that have reached out to me that their employer's paying for them to get to work through Uber and Lyft. They don't drive. And so they're very afraid of what's going to happen. I've had people reach out to me that are disabled. They need Uber and Lyft. We have people that, for so many situations, and the business community moving in, coming in for conferences. And I've also had several parents call me and say, what's the plan? We had so much efforts on reducing DWIs and driving, under the influence. And their kids are in college in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And people rely on Uber and Lyft for our public safety. And so I have great concerns with that, of what the backup plan will be for kids going to college and people getting to work. And then it's not even just the recreation of if you want to go to a Vikings game or a baseball game, or people fly into the airports and need a ride, or are traveling. It impacts our tourism market for not just Minneapolis-St. Paul. People fly in, and then maybe they need an Uber Lyft to get where they're going, and maybe they're going to be coming up the North Shore, whatever they're going to be doing. But I think it impedes many things, and so I think that preemptive piece makes sense at the legislature. I think it's going to affect people's ability. The infrastructure has been based on Uber and Lyft for quite a while, and it was set up as a 1099, and I think that we have a lot to discuss, so we'll see if it comes to us on the House floor.
But as a legislator from northeastern Minnesota, and a strong believer in local control, do you not think the city of Minneapolis can do what they want for their community, and that the state should respect that?
I think the local control you're talking about is setting wages, and no, I don't think that they have any business setting wage levels for a business as a city.
And whose responsibility is that then?
I think it's the owner.
Okay.
It's whoever the private business is. That's their business model, and so whatever that is between the business and the employee.
But the state has a minimum wage. The federal government has set a minimum wage, so that we have a precedent there that units of government set minimum wages.
Right, correct. And my understanding is that minimum wage happens in those cases. So what the request is not about minimum wage, it's about setting a different benchmark. And so that's going into, I would say, a private sector market.
Senator Burke.
Yeah, I think, this has been a difficult conversation. I remember when Uber and Lyft first were starting, and I kind of talked about it's like, well, why aren't they having to follow the same regulations that taxi cab companies have to follow? Yep. And because they didn't have to meet those same requirements, we've seen the taxi cab industry decimated, and it's virtually gone. I believe somebody said that something or 60-some taxi cabs remain in the entire metro area. And so they can't pick up the slack if Uber and Lyft shut down even for a little while. And so, I see that as this has a statewide impact. And when we talk about the minimum wage and some of these other things that we're going to do to businesses, requirements we put on businesses, if we start doing it city by city by city, you're going to have a lot of companies, especially contractors that are very mobile and move around from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. They're just going to be like, put their hands up in the air and say, I have no way of knowing what and keeping up with what my requirements are in all of these different cities. And so in cases like that, that's where I believe it is good to do it on a statewide level if there's going to be anything that's done for these requirements, whether like licensing and minimum wage, things like that.
All right, well, keep your questions coming in. We have quite a few here. First one up, a retired firefighter from Duluth is asking, fire and police pensions have been frozen at 1% for several years. Over the past 3 years, the pensions have fallen behind inflation by over 13%. Is there anything being proposed that can be done to address the pensions of our frontline service members? Police and firefighter pensions. Are any of you familiar with any work being done on this issue?
I know there were some proposals last year, and once again, those pensions and then also the teacher pensions were big issues that came up, and when we saw, again, the target that was given to the pension commission, there was no way to address those with that dollar amount that was given. And
can we just explain to the viewers back home, setting targets and committees? Yeah. I'm a little bit familiar with this from my past job, but each committee gets decided, here's the amount of money that you have available to you this year to spend in those specific topic areas of committees. And it being not a budget year, those are smaller numbers.
Yeah, so last year when we had the $17 to $19 billion surplus, a certain dollar amount was given to each of the different committee areas as to here would be your portion of that surplus. And the Pensions Commission was not given a very big target to deal with. I know the discussions are continuing. There's also a number of discussions, the EMS situation that we're in, the lack of people going into it, for rural areas, how do we keep these afloat? There are talks about, is pension an issue that could, if we increase the pensions, could that drive people into those areas? So a lot of discussions around that. Those are usually things that take a few years to get done.
And EMS is our ambulance drivers, emergency medical service. Representative Zeleznikar, it sounds like not something that's going to happen this year because of budgetary constraints.
Unfortunately, to the points that Senator Rarick made, that is what it appears to be. I did sign on bills that would support the police and the firefighters, and also supported, looking at a pathway for teachers to have retirement at 62 after 30 years of, work time. And so I know that those are important issues to many of our members in our community. So we were trying to look at pathways forward. The targets were set, and so it's a wait and see right now. But I think there's going to be ongoing discussions for sure.
All right. Got a few questions around property taxes. I'm going to bunch them all together. Roberta asks, and it's really in Grandview, stating there are so many people building mega houses that the property valuation and taxes are rising so much it's forcing people out. Local zoning control would limit this. And then another viewer is asking, why can't we follow the lead of other states and freeze property taxes for seniors and retirees to prevent them from being taxed out of their homes? And so to remind the viewers back home, your property taxes are generally set by your counties, your cities, and your local school districts and townships to fund those core government services at that level, though the state legislature does play roles in property taxes in different ways. And so how would you reply to either of these viewers who are concerned about their property taxes? What, if anything, this year is the state doing to address these issues? Representative Zeleznikar, we'll start with you.
Those are great questions, and questions I get from many of my constituents. And I would say two of the things that I've signed on to, one is to do that for senior citizens, to do a cap that would allow, to the point of the caller, to address the senior citizens, because many people feel like the price valuations are going so high and their Social Security income is not. And so they're really concerned that they're going to get priced out not being able to pay their property taxes. So we've looked at a percentage base for senior citizens, and I did sign on a bill for that. And then I also looked at a bill, and I signed on one that would look at a 4-year period of property valuations, because these big spikes that have been happening with the market the way it is right now have been very problematic for people, because they've seen their neighbor's house sell for prices that are just unheard of. And they didn't have anything done to their house, but now they're seeing huge valuations. And that's just the way the laws are written. It's going by the sale price. And so in this situation where we have really high interest rates for people buying homes and then selling homes, this whole issue of not having enough new homes entering into the marketplace is driving that too. And so I looked at that is probably a fair way to do it. So I hope we'll have discussion. I don't anticipate we're going to see it happen this year. But I do look forward to it next year, because we really have to find some solutions to the property tax issue for seniors and really people of all ages. I'm getting calls from everybody about their property taxes.
Yeah, this is one, it's complicated, just like you said. The legislature sets the formulas, but it's your local, county, city, township, school district that drive what the local property taxes would be. One of the things we are seeing that I hear a lot about, because of the property values going up so much, people, we have what we call the homestead exclusion, that up to a certain level, typically about $300,000, is maybe not taxed or taxed lower, and especially I know for veterans, that's the threshold for them. And now their property values are going up so high that exclusion is very small. And it's just not helping anymore. So those are things I think at the state legislature, that would be something we would set where those numbers would be for those exclusions. And then there could also be things that we could do if we're going to freeze property taxes. That would take state dollars going to the counties and to all these entities to replace what would be generated from the property taxes. So once
And just in context, that could potentially be billions of dollars.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's why this year that wouldn't be a
not gonna
discussion.
So
And
to your point of
Yes.
billions, that would have been a last year great topic to deal with property taxes when we had almost a $20 billion surplus. And now that surplus is gone, so we're not in a position to be looking at property tax reform in the way that I think the public is looking for us to do. But it's still a big priority, and we need to address it. And I think we will be looking at options.
next year, though, it
Yes.
looks like. Yes. So not something for the viewers at home this year.
Yes.
All right. Continuing to get questions coming in. Another question here is from a viewer asking, and it's brief, and I'm not familiar with the issue. Any comment on Representative Dotseth's proposal to ground flights? Are either of you familiar with anything that Representative Dotseth is doing around grounding airline? I'm guessing plane flights. Familiar with?
I
don't
have
know.
not heard that bill.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually as the senator from his district, that might have been something he approached me about to carry in the Senate, and so but I don't know what that bill is. No.
Okay. And just for the viewers at home, legislators sit on certain committees, and there are topics that they wouldn't see until things progress in the process. So I'm assuming that this isn't making any progress this year, or else we would have heard about it by now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
All right. Next up, we have a question back to the resolution of support for Israelis, and a viewer wants to know, why would a resolution support Israelis and not Palestinians? Is there any proposal to support the Palestinian folks as well?
Not that I'm aware of, but I know as far as the Palestinian people, I think most everybody again agrees supporting them. It's Hamas that is where people are saying this is where the problem is. They're the ones creating the issue, and part of what the tricky part of this is that Hamas is the ruling governing body in Palestine right now. They were elected a few years ago and now have taken control, and the Palestinian people are being ruled by Hamas. And that's, I think, where part of the problem comes in doing a resolution to support Palestine. It is also supporting Hamas. And so that's, I think, where we're seeing some hesitation to do that. But I do believe most people want to support and believe in making sure the Palestinian people we always make sure we know their plight, and during this whole conflict that they are allowed to be taken care of as well.
And so we are getting into foreign affairs here on the Minnesota Legislative Report. However, certainly we are seeing on our TV screens thousands of women and children, Palestinian women and children in particular, getting killed in this part of the world. And so, Representative Zeleznikar, back to the question of supporting Israelis and not Palestinians. Is that what we're seeing?
I don't think I have anything more to add than Senator Rarick said. I mean, we all see the unfortunate events taking place, and my bobber is looking at northeastern Minnesota right now and trying to get us through the end of the legislature on the things that I can affect, which are the issues that we're talking about with bonding and child care and emergency medical services, and make sure we have 911 calls coming to Pequam and Cloquet and all the areas. So while, I understand the question, it's just not a piece of our jurisdiction. We're about equal to everybody who's calling in, of just being concerned about it and hoping for the best that we can get through this in peaceful ways.
Looks like we have some more details of Representative Dotseth's bill. We've got viewers that are calling in, which is great. Thank you for doing so. And this is the Dotseth bill is a proposal to have county sheriffs shut down airspace for suspected cloud seeding or government manipulation of the environment and chemtrails. And so, does that ring a bell for anybody as a proposal?
No. I'm hearing you, what you're reading, but I have not heard that bill. I mean, we haven't heard it. I sit on children and workforce and health and human services. So it's not something we've talked about at caucus or been ready to prepare to vote on for the House floor. So this is I don't see this going anywhere.
Okay.
No. It might be something that somebody in the local community brought to him as a concern, and he submitted it to show them support.
Correct.
But it has not. It's not something that's probably even had a committee hearing to have, because I haven't heard about it at all.
Okay. We're getting some more questions around Social Security and pensions and some more details that I'll share with you all offline, because this looks more like not a question, but a comment with some more background. We've got a viewer from the Chisholm-Hibbing area who is wondering why there are not always Democratic and Republican representatives at the table at the same time. And so actually this is more probably a question for us at PBS North than the legislators. We invite all legislators from northeastern Minnesota onto the show. And when they're available, they come. So sometimes you see 2 Republicans, sometimes you see 2 DFLers, and sometimes it mixes it up. It's really based on what their schedule allows to do, but all legislators from northeastern Minnesota are invited. And I try to gently push back when we have 2 of the same team on here, as hopefully you've seen me do today.
I can say over the years I've been here with Representative Sundin and Representative Liz Olson a number of times. So.
All right, great. So another question, as we're heading in here to the last 3 weeks, things are funneled down now, and that's really what happens here, is not all the issues, as we were just discussing, a state rep's bill that's probably not in consideration here. What do you hope, if the legislature could prioritize in these last 3 weeks, what are you hoping to see for sure get done here? Because as we said before, there's nothing that you have to do constitutionally this year. So what are your hopes of maybe your biggest 1 or 2 things that you feel need to get done before the end of this legislative session that realistically have a chance to get done? Representative Zeleznikar, we'll start with you.
I think that the emergency medical system has to be addressed. That is something that is affecting all of greater Minnesota in a very high level, and we are holding on by a thread in many of the townships, and it's across the state. And so while the Metro works a little differently with the hospital systems and the ambulance services, I think that, you know, regardless of zip code, the expectation is people are going to have an ambulance arrive. And so we have to find a way, and I've been serving on that task force. You know, Senator Seeberger and then Representative Hewitt were selected as the chairs by the governor for that task force, and I was selected to be on that too. And it's been interesting because 70% of the ambulance calls are non-emergency transportation, and we're really lacking non-emergency transportation. So we talked about Uber and Lyft for the cities. That's probably why I'm so concerned about that for seniors that are aging, disability lanes. That is just the same issue that we have in greater Minnesota, is non-emergency transportation. And the number that everybody remembers when they're aging, even with dementia and Alzheimer's, they remember 911. That's the long-term memory. And so when we're moving to a model of having everybody live at home for as long as possible, which is a great plan that everybody wants, we need to make sure we have non-emergency transportation taken care of. So I've been working on initiatives for that. And then looking at how it's not just a stopgap with money. I've talked to the townships. They know exactly how much money they're losing. And so we have to grow this volunteer program and then grow our EMT program. I wrote a bill. It's in the workforce committee. I sit on that committee, and it made it through. It's going to end up in the omnibus for workforce for $100,000 for 2 harbors to do a pilot project for an EMT program. And I was in health occupation class in 10th grade. So this is a program where you get the training in 11th and 12th grade. You graduate. You're going to take your test. And so I think that will help the North Shore, Cook County and Lake County, and we can then take that to other places. But I think we need to get the ambulance piece taken care of. And for me, you know, knowing that we had $17.5 billion, it's hard to see that we have such low targets to deal with a bipartisan issue that's been noted as a problem since 2002. So we can't leave this session without dealing with emergency medical services, because it's not going to have a good ending if we don't address it for the people.
And most say that though whatever is addressed this year is merely a Band-Aid. I think most people agree on that as well. This is just a stopgap to get us to next year, and you're talking about a few pilot projects. But longer term, what needs to be done within this system of emergency services and ambulance services across the state? What needs to change either at the local, state, or federal level in order to fix this?
Well, I signed on a bill that allows them, during the pandemic, we had different rules for who could drive the ambulance, and townships are asking for that. And so that's an easy fix for us to change to put those pandemic rules back in. We're in a healing moment for many pieces. Education is moving through issues following the pandemic. We've got issues with our EMS for growing our teams again. So that would be a solution. And then looking at opportunities to grow and give stipends for our volunteers. A lot of these people are very low paid, hardly anything. And so giving some compensation, paying for their tabs and their license if you're in the volunteer firefighters and you are the first responder before the ambulance, just simple things like that don't have a big fiscal note, but starts appreciating the people and then growing our program. And the EMTs, I think, are essential to get those in the career technical education in the school systems, and then have us pay for that up front. That's going to help take the load off. And then we know how many runs that they're doing, and so finding a way to fiscally reimburse them. We know we've been underfunding them. The medical assistance rates are very low, and they have been for years, so it's not new news. And so we know how many runs they're doing, and we can look at Greater Minnesota and give them the relief they need and continue looking at solutions. But just creating a new board, to me, I'm not for that. I understand. I've seen a lot of task force and boards be created, but it's not going to change who's showing up for that call. It's not going to change that at all. Not in Greater Minnesota. We have to financially incentivize these people and give them what they need. And that's what they're asking for.
Senator Rarick, your top priorities that you want to see get done before the end of the session?
I think one of the most realistic things to focus on is going to be the infrastructure investment. Most people think that is, through bonding. I think there is potentially a path to readjust our targets and do a cash bill instead of borrowing money. When you look at the situation the Senate is in right now, potentially being a 33-33, that could be one path that we could take. But I do think addressing our infrastructure is, we can't ignore it because it just keeps getting in worse condition. Mm-hmm. So,
and you saying cash, that would be taking what is projected as a surplus this year and
Correct.
Using that instead of borrowing.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. So a couple other questions here as we're running short on time, but a lot of questions from viewers. Sports betting, folks are wondering, is an issue that's certainly been discussed about for years, and it has made its way probably as far as it's ever gotten in the legislature. Are we going to be seeing sports betting passed this year? Senator Rarick.
Last time I was on here, I think this came up and I said, yes, I think there was a good path. Today, I'm a little less, I think it's a little smaller chance this year. When we look at what happened with the Sports Commission and allowing the racetracks to do this, the historic horse betting, and that really upset the tribes. And now it has created a big fight between the tracks and the tribes. And I think a lot of legislators who were leaning towards voting yes were saying we need to make sure both of these groups as well as the charitable gambling folks are taken care of. And I think this potentially put a wrench in that for this year. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think that decision by the Racing Commission really potentially put some doubt in this getting done.
View from the House, Representative Zeleznikar.
I would concur with what Senator Rarick said. I think with the multiple issues that are facing that lane of the gambling topic of adding sports betting, it's also looking at the charitable gambling, the horse tracks, all of it. So I think with everything else that's on our plate with a short rest of the session, I don't see it happening this year. I'm open to listening to that conversation if it comes to the House floor, but I will be surprised if it comes to the House floor because we only have so many days left. I could be wrong.
And we only have a few minutes left, and it's hard to bring up an issue like this with just a few minutes, but if you could touch on, there is some gun control legislation that's going to be discussed, I believe, in the House starting this week sometime. Representative Zeleznikar, can you talk about what those proposals might be if you're aware of them and if you support them? I
think it's an interesting time for those gun bills because the Senate author of those bills is the senator that's been charged, or not charged, but arrested. And so there's a lot of questions about that. We have them on the floor tomorrow. So we'll have, I think there's 3 gun bills tomorrow that are going to be on the House floor. I think there's 6 or 8 bills we're going to see. So the gun storage is one. The mandatory reporting for a stolen firearm is another one. And then the other one, I believe, is related to the
Is it the straw purchases?
straw purchase, but it's not just the straw purchase bill. I believe it should have been a standalone bill. Now it has trigger implications added. They modified that bill, so it's a different bill now than it originally was. So we'll be taking up all those bills, so I look forward to the discussion tomorrow on the House floor.
Any positions on any of those 3 bills you just mentioned?
I would say no. It's
On
a
all
no
3?
vote for me, yes.
Okay. And why?
Well, do you have about an hour?
Probably
There's a
got-
long list.
Yes.
There's a long list.
But just briefly, your major concern.
The storage questions, I think, are very problematic for people. I mean, you're basically not able to have, your gun has to be in a safe, you know. So when people are living by themselves, or I've had single moms say to me, look, I want to know that I'm safe in my house for my kids. I've had all kinds of scenarios. I don't want to have to go get my ammo and put it in the, you know, it's in the safe. It's not going to be able to be accessible fast for them if they're burglarized or they feel their life is in danger. So I think there's many questions for people, and on the 48 hours or that time frame of reporting, sometimes people don't know that it's been stolen. Their gun has been stolen. So you're basically criminalizing a law-abiding person for something they don't know. Cabins and various places that people could be breaking in.
And Senator Rarick, I'm sure you have a lot to say on this, and unfortunately we're out of time, so we're going to end on a cliffhanger with where you're at on this issue, and I apologize for that. But we are out of time, and I'd like to thank Senator Rarick and Representative Zeleznikar for joining us here this evening, answering questions and sharing their thoughts. We will be back again next Sunday at 5 to speak with even more members of the Minnesota State Legislature and answer more of your questions. Thank you for watching, and to the viewers at home for calling and writing in with your questions. You're playing a vital part in our representative government. For the team here at PBS North, I'm Tony Sertich. Have a great evening.